The old house had always felt quiet, almost too quiet, like it was holding its breath. When Lena stepped inside after so many years, the air carried the smell of dust and old wood, mixed with a faint trace of her grandmother's perfume. It was the kind of scent that could pull memories from the corners of her mind. Warm tea in the kitchen, soft humming from the garden, and the gentle sound of rain tapping against the windows during long afternoons. Now the house stood empty, filled only with silence and ghosts of the past. She had come back because there was no one else to take care of it. Her grandmother had passed away months earlier, and her mother, who lived abroad, told her to handle the estate. It felt strange being there alone, walking through rooms that once seemed so full of life. The wallpaper was peeling, the furniture covered with sheets, and a thin layer of dust rested on every surface. Still, Lena couldn't bring herself to rush through it. Each room told a story. Each object felt like a whisper from another time. She started with the kitchen, opening cabinets that held cracked teacups and neatly stacked jars of herbs long dried up. Her grandmother had been the kind of woman who never threw anything away. There were buttons in old cookie tins, ribbons folded neatly, and handwritten recipes that smelled faintly of cinnamon and sugar. Lena smiled as she picked up one of the recipe cards. The handwriting was neat and soft, just like she remembered. For a moment it almost felt like her grandmother was still there, standing beside her, reminding her to measure the sugar carefully. The next few days were slow. She cleaned, sorted, and boxed up things that had been untouched for years. The sun would rise through the dusty windows, filling the house with soft golden light, and she would lose track of time as she worked. Sometimes she would stop to look at old photographs or read a letter tucked inside a drawer. Most of them were simple: birthday cards, invitations, and faded snapshots of family gatherings. But even in their simplicity, they made her feel connected to something deep, something she hadn't felt in years. One afternoon, as the sky turned gray with the promise of rain, she decided to clean the attic. It had always been her least favorite part of the house. The narrow staircase creaked under her weight, and the air grew cooler the higher she climbed. When she reached the top, she had to push the door open with some force. It groaned like it hadn't been moved in a long time. A thin beam of light from the small window cut across the room, revealing dust floating lazily in the air. The attic was cluttered with boxes, old furniture, and things that time had forgotten. A broken rocking chair leaned against a trunk. A stack of magazines from the 1960s sat in a corner, their pages yellow and brittle. She found herself brushing her hands along the tops of boxes, reading the faded labels written in her grandmother's handwriting. Winter clothes, Christmas decorations, school papers. She began sorting through them one by one. Most were filled with predictable things: old coats, decorations, keepsakes. But then near the far end of the attic, half hidden behind a rolled-up rug, she noticed something different. It was a wooden box, small and dark, with ornate carvings along its surface. The carvings looked handmade, almost delicate, like someone had taken a long time to create them. What caught her attention most were the initials carved on top: EM. They didn't match anyone she knew in her family. She tried to lift the lid, but it wouldn't open. It was locked. A small brass lock held it shut, tarnished by age. She turned it in her hands, feeling the smooth edges of the wood. It felt heavier than it looked, as if the contents inside were waiting patiently to be found. She set it down carefully and sat beside it, staring at it for a long while. Something about the box made her uneasy, though she couldn't explain why. It felt familiar in a way she couldn't place, like a melody she'd heard once but couldn't remember the lyrics to. Lena searched the attic for a key but didn't find one. She brought the box downstairs and placed it on the kitchen table. The sound of the rain had started by then, tapping softly against the windows. She made herself a cup of tea and sat down, staring at the box as steam rose from her cup. The light flickered slightly as the clouds thickened outside. Her thoughts wandered back to her grandmother. The woman had always been kind, calm, and gentle, but there had been secrets in her silence. Whenever Lena asked questions about her early childhood or her grandfather, her grandmother would smile and change the subject. Some things are better left in the past, she would say. It had never made sense to her. But now, staring at this box with the strange initials, Lena felt that maybe there were stories her grandmother had never wanted to tell. She decided she had to find the key. The next morning, she went through the entire house again. She checked every drawer, every cabinet, even behind picture frames. She found plenty of old keys, some rusted, some tiny and delicate, but none of them fit. Her last hope was her grandmother's sewing kit. It was an old wooden box, too, smaller and filled with spools of thread, buttons, and needles. As she moved the contents aside, something caught her eye. Beneath a layer of fabric scraps was a small ribbon, faded red from age. Attached to it was a tiny brass key. Her heart gave a small jump. She turned it in her hand, feeling its weight. It was old, and the shape of the teeth looked like it might fit the box. She went back to the kitchen, placed the key in the lock, and turned it slowly. The sound of the click echoed softly in the quiet room. She lifted the lid carefully. Inside were several bundles of letters tied with string, a few black and white photographs, and what looked like official papers folded neatly at the bottom. Everything was worn, the edges yellowed by time. She picked up one of the letters and unfolded it gently. The handwriting was beautiful, old-fashioned, and written in blue ink. "My dear friend," it began, "there are some things I have never been able to say out loud, but perhaps these words will find you when the time is right." Lena read slowly, her eyes moving across each line. The letter spoke of friendship, secrets, and choices made long ago. It was signed "With love, Eleanor." The name didn't mean anything to her at first. She checked the next letter. It was also from Eleanor, written to her grandmother, filled with warm words and deep emotion. The letter spoke of shared memories, of promises made and kept. But as she continued reading, the tone of the letters changed. The later ones were filled with sadness, longing, and something unspoken, something almost heavy. By the time she reached the fifth letter, her hands had begun to tremble slightly. Eleanor mentioned a child. A baby who had been given a new beginning and who must never know the truth until the time is right. Lena froze. She read the lines again and again. Her heart started to beat faster. There was no name, no clear detail, but something inside her stirred. It felt personal, almost too personal. She pushed the letters aside and reached for the photographs. There were 3 of them. One showed 2 young women standing together near a river. One was clearly her grandmother. She recognized the smile, the eyes. The other must have been Eleanor. She had kind eyes and a warm smile, the kind that made her seem familiar even to a stranger. The second photograph was of her grandmother holding a newborn baby. The third was just the baby, wrapped in a blanket lying in a small wooden cradle. Lena stared at the pictures for a long time, her thoughts swirling. She looked again at the handwriting, the dates, the tone of the letters. It didn't make sense, yet something inside her told her it did. The pieces didn't fit, but they were starting to form a shape. She thought about the initials on the box, EM, and wondered if the M might stand for her grandmother's name and the E for Eleanor. The sound of thunder rolled outside. She placed the letters back in the box and closed it gently. Her tea had gone cold. She felt restless, uncertain, as if the air itself had changed. That night she lay in bed unable to sleep. The rain had stopped, but her mind kept replaying the same words from the letters. Who was Eleanor? What did she mean about the baby? And why would her grandmother keep all of this hidden for so long? There was a feeling deep inside her, quiet but insistent, that she was standing at the edge of something big. Something that could change the way she saw her own life. The box had been locked for decades, but maybe it wasn't just the wood or the metal that kept it closed. Maybe it was holding back the truth, waiting for the right moment to be found. As she closed her eyes, Lena knew one thing for sure. She couldn't stop now. Whatever story these letters held, she needed to know it, even if it meant uncovering something her family never wanted her to find. The next morning, the air inside the house felt heavier than before. Lena sat at the kitchen table with the old box in front of her, staring at it like it might suddenly start speaking. The letters, the photographs, the name Eleanor, it all stayed in her mind like a melody she couldn't stop hearing. The rain from the night before had left the air cool and fresh, but her thoughts were tangled and restless. She made herself a cup of coffee and tried to calm down. The steam rose slowly, but her hands trembled as she lifted the cup. Every time she blinked, she saw the image of the baby from the photograph. It felt strange, but there was something in that picture, something familiar she couldn't ignore. The way the baby's eyes were shaped, the way its little hand curled, it stirred something deep inside her that she couldn't explain. She looked at the letters again. The handwriting was neat, the ink faded in places but still readable. She wanted to believe they were just old stories from a time long gone, nothing more than two women sharing their private thoughts. But deep down she knew there was more to it. Her grandmother had kept that box locked away for decades. There had to be a reason. Lena decided to read every single letter carefully one by one to see if she had missed something before. She untied the first bundle of letters and began to read again, her eyes tracing every word like they were clues in a mystery. The earlier letters were simple, full of kindness and warmth. They talked about daily life, gardens, and the weather. They mentioned tea parties and laughter, the kind of friendship that felt pure and easy. But as the letters went on, the tone shifted. Eleanor began writing about loneliness, about being far from home, about making difficult choices. In one of the letters, Eleanor wrote, "You once told me that love means doing what's best for someone, even if it breaks your heart. I never understood that until now." Lena felt her stomach tighten as she read those words. She flipped through the next few letters. There were more hints, small pieces that didn't make sense on their own, but together they started forming a painful picture. Eleanor mentioned the baby several times. She talked about how she prayed the child would grow up safe, surrounded by kindness and stability. She thanked Lena's grandmother for being her saving grace. The last line in one of the letters made Lena's breath catch. "Please tell her someday who she really is. She deserves to know." Lena sat frozen. "Her," she whispered to herself. She felt a chill run through her arms. The letters were not just about any baby. They were about someone real, someone alive, someone close. Her heart began to beat faster. Could it be possible that the letters were talking about her? She tried to reason with herself, telling her mind not to jump to conclusions, but the feeling only grew stronger. The idea sounded impossible, yet everything pointed toward it. The timeline in the letters, the emotion behind Eleanor's words, the way her grandmother had hidden the box so carefully, it all led in one direction. She remembered how, growing up, there were moments when her mother avoided certain questions about her early childhood. She had always thought it was because her family had gone through hard times, but now, those moments started to look different. Every silence, every pause, every change of subject, it all seemed connected. Lena knew she couldn't find the answers by herself. She needed to talk to her mother. That afternoon, she called her. The sound of her mother's voice brought back a mix of comfort and unease. She spoke softly, almost too calmly, as if trying to hide the tension in her words. "Mom," Lena began carefully, "I found something in Grandma's house." "What kind of something?" her mother asked, her tone polite but cautious. "It's a box, with letters. From someone named Eleanor. Do you know who that is?" There was silence on the other end. The kind of silence that fills a room like a thick fog. Lena could almost hear her mother's breath catching. "Eleanor," her mother repeated slowly. "That was someone your grandmother used to know. A friend, I think." Her voice didn't sound convincing. Lena pressed on gently. "Mom, the letters talk about a baby, about someone being adopted, about telling her the truth one day." Another pause. "This time longer. Where did you find them?" her mother asked quietly. "In the attic?" "Grandma had them locked away." "Why would she keep them hidden?" Her mother sighed deeply, a sound heavy with years of unspoken words. "Lena, some things from the past were meant to be left alone. Your grandmother went through a lot. She tried to protect the family. You don't need to dig into old wounds." "But Mom," Lena said softly, "what if those wounds belong to me?" The line went quiet again. For a moment, Lena thought the call had disconnected. Then her mother spoke, her voice trembling. "You don't understand what you're asking. There are things that were done out of love, not lies. Your grandmother loved you more than anything." "Loved me?" Lena repeated, her voice cracking. "What does that mean? What are you not telling me?" Her mother's voice broke. "I can't." "Not right now." And then, almost in a whisper, she said, "I'm sorry." Before Lena could say anything else, the line went dead. She sat there for a long time, staring at her phone, her heart pounding. The quiet of the house pressed around her. She felt like she was standing in the middle of a storm that had been waiting years to break. That night she couldn't sleep. She lay awake listening to the wind against the windows. Every thought chased another, faster and faster, until her mind was a blur. She thought about Eleanor, about her grandmother, about the word adopted. It didn't feel real. It couldn't be. and yet everything pointed to that truth. The next morning, she decided to go to the town records office. If her mother wouldn't tell her, she would find out herself. The clerk at the records desk was a kind older man with glasses and a calm smile. "How can I help you?" he asked. "I need to see birth records," Lena said, trying to sound casual. "For myself." He nodded and led her to a small room filled with shelves of dusty books and files. The room smelled of paper and old ink. He pointed to a section near the back. "Births from that year are there," he said before walking away. Lena searched through the records, her hands shaking slightly as she flipped through pages. She found her own name easily. It was there, just as she expected. But when she looked closer, her breath caught. Under mother's name, it didn't say her mother's name. It said Eleanor. Her heart stopped. Her hands went cold. She stared at the page for what felt like minutes, her eyes refusing to move. She whispered the name to herself like it was something sacred and unfamiliar at the same time. She felt dizzy, the air thick in her chest. It was true. Everything she had been afraid to believe was true. She thanked the clerk with a weak smile and walked out of the building, the wind cool against her face. The town looked the same as it always had, people walking, cars passing. But everything inside her had changed. The world looked different now, sharper, more fragile. As she drove back to the house, her thoughts came in waves: confusion, sadness, anger, and then silence. The kind of silence that doesn't mean peace, but the heavy pause before a storm. She sat in her car in front of the house for a long time, watching the trees sway gently in the breeze. Somewhere inside, she could almost hear her grandmother's voice again, that familiar warmth telling her, "Some things are better left in the past." But she knew it was too late for that now. The past had already found her. She went back inside and sat at the table again, the old box still there, waiting. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the polished wood. She touched the carved initials with her fingertips and whispered, "Eleanor." The name felt strange but comforting, like it had been waiting on her tongue her whole life. For the first time, Lena wasn't sure who she really was. The only thing she knew for certain was that the woman she had always called her grandmother had kept the biggest secret of all, not out of cruelty, but out of love, and now the truth was no longer locked away. It was in her hands, written in fading ink, ready to be faced. Lena woke up the next morning with a heavy feeling in her chest. The sunlight coming through the curtains felt too bright, too calm for what was going on inside her. The discovery from the day before kept echoing in her mind. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that document again, the birth record with Eleanor's name where her mother's should have been. It didn't feel real. It didn't feel possible. Yet it was there, printed in black and white, a truth that couldn't be erased. She sat at the edge of the bed, her hands resting on her knees. The house was quiet except for the distant ticking of the old clock downstairs, her grandmother's clock, the one that had always reminded her that time never stopped for anyone. She thought about how her grandmother must have wound it up every morning, how she must have walked around this same house with a secret she carried every day of her life. After a few minutes, Lena stood up and went to the kitchen. The wooden box still sat on the table exactly where she had left it. The sight of it made her heart tighten. She pulled out one of the letters again, reading the words slowly, almost afraid of what else she might find hidden between the lines. In one of the later letters, Eleanor had written, "If I could have been stronger, maybe things would have been different. But love made me do what I thought was right. I hope one day she'll understand that I never wanted to leave her. I wanted her to have a chance to live." Lena pressed her hand over her mouth as she read. Her eyes stung. She could almost hear Eleanor's voice in those words, soft and filled with pain. She tried to imagine what it must have been like for her, to carry a baby, hold her for a short time, and then hand her over to someone else. She thought about how her grandmother must have felt, raising a child who wasn't truly hers but loving her like she was. It was love, but it was also loss. And now that love and loss had landed in Lena's hands, demanding to be understood. She knew she couldn't keep wondering forever. There were still too many questions. Why had Eleanor given her up? Where had she come from? Was there anyone still alive who knew the full story? She decided to visit her mother again, even though the last conversation had ended painfully. Maybe now, after knowing what Lena had found, her mother would finally talk. The drive to her mother's house felt longer than usual. The roads twisted through old trees, their branches heavy with the weight of autumn. When she arrived, her mother was sitting on the porch as if she had been waiting. For a moment, they just looked at each other. There was no anger in her mother's eyes this time, only exhaustion and something that looked like regret. "You found the record," her mother said quietly. It wasn't a question, it was something she already knew. Lena nodded. "I did." Her mother looked down at her hands, which were clasped tightly together. "I was hoping you wouldn't, but I suppose it was only a matter of time. Why didn't you tell me?" Lena asked softly. Her voice wasn't angry, just tired, almost pleading. Her mother took a deep breath and looked away. "Because it wasn't my story to tell. Your grandmother made me promise. She said it would only hurt you. And maybe she was right for a long time. But maybe she was wrong too." There was a long pause before she continued. "Eleanor was your real mother. She was my aunt. She was young, barely out of her teens when she got pregnant. It wasn't an easy time. People talked. The family was strict and she was alone. Your grandmother, my mother, took her in. But when you were born, Eleanor became very sick. The doctor said she needed rest, that she couldn't take care of a baby. So my mother stepped in. What started as helping turned into something permanent." Lena's throat felt dry. "So she just gave me away?" Her mother shook her head quickly. "No, it wasn't like that. She never stopped loving you. She wrote those letters every month, even after she moved away. She sent gifts, photos, anything to feel close to you. But your grandmother never told you about them. She thought it would only confuse you. She wanted you to grow up feeling safe, not torn between two worlds." Lena looked down, trying to hold her emotions together. "And Eleanor? What happened to her?" Her mother's eyes softened. "She passed away years ago. It broke her heart to stay away, but she never wanted to disrupt your life. She believed you were happy. That was enough for her." The words hit hard. Eleanor had died thinking she was doing the right thing. She had loved her from afar, silently, watching her life unfold from a distance. The thought of it made Lena's chest ache. Her mother reached across the table and took her hand. "Your grandmother loved you as her own. You were never treated any differently. She just wanted to protect you from pain. Maybe she went about it the wrong way, but she did it out of love." Tears rolled down Lena's face as she nodded slowly. "I know," she whispered. "I know she loved me, but it hurts not knowing the truth until now." Her mother squeezed her hand gently. "The truth always hurts when it comes late, but it also heals if you let it." They sat in silence for a long while, the sound of birds filling the air. It wasn't the kind of silence that needed to be broken. It was one that carried understanding. Before leaving, Lena asked if her mother had any more of Eleanor's things. Her mother hesitated, then went inside and came back with a small envelope. "This was the last letter she ever sent. I never opened it. I thought it was better that way, but I think it's yours now." Lena held the envelope carefully. The paper was yellowed with age, but her name was written clearly on the front, in the same delicate handwriting she had seen before. She thanked her mother and left quietly. Back at the old house, the air felt different. Not lighter, not heavier, just still. She sat down at the table with the envelope in front of her. Her fingers trembled as she slid the letter out. The writing was familiar and gentle. "My sweet girl," it began. "If you're reading this, it means the time has come for you to know everything. I have loved you from the moment I first held you. Life took us apart, but not for lack of love. Sometimes love looks like distance, and I hope one day you'll forgive me for that. I wanted you to grow up safe, surrounded by kindness with someone who could give you more than I ever could. If you ever feel lost, look in the mirror. You'll see me there. You'll see both of us." Lena covered her mouth, tears spilling freely down her cheeks. The letter ended with one simple line. "You are not lost, you were just waiting to be found." She read it again and again, each word sinking deeper into her heart. For the first time, she didn't feel angry or betrayed. She felt seen. She felt whole. That night, she took the old box outside and sat on the porch. The air was cool and the stars stretched wide above her. She placed the letters carefully back inside and closed the lid. The carvings on top felt different now, not mysterious but meaningful. She whispered into the night, "I found you, Eleanor. I found us." A soft wind passed through the trees, brushing her hair lightly as if in answer. For the first time since she had opened that box, Lena felt a quiet kind of peace. She still had questions, still had wounds to heal, but the anger had faded. In its place was something gentler, understanding. She realized that discovering who she really was didn't erase the life she had lived or the people who had loved her. It only made the story bigger, richer, more human. It made her see that sometimes truth doesn't take love away. It only makes it deeper. As she closed her eyes, she whispered a thank you into the dark. Not just to Eleanor, but to her grandmother, too. For love in all its imperfect, complicated forms. The clock inside the house chimed softly, its sound echoing through the quiet night. Time, steady and forgiving, carried on, and for the first time, Lena felt ready to move with it. Lena spent the next few days trying to make sense of everything she had learned. Each morning she woke up to the sound of birds outside the window, but her thoughts were louder. The truth had settled inside her like a heavy stone, not painful anymore, but not light either. It was strange, knowing she had lived her whole life as one person, and then discovering there was another story written underneath her own. Sometimes she would catch herself staring at the mirror, searching for traces of Eleanor in her reflection. She wondered what her real mother had looked like when she laughed, how her voice might have sounded, what kind of person she was. The letters had painted a picture of a kind, gentle woman who carried too many burdens but never stopped loving. It made Lena wish she could have known her, not as a mystery but as a mother. The old house had started to feel like a living memory now. Every room seemed to whisper something new. While cleaning one of the bedrooms one afternoon, she found a box of old photographs under the bed. Most of them were of her grandmother, younger and smiling, but in the corner of one photo, Lena noticed a familiar face. Eleanor. She was standing beside her grandmother, holding a baby. Her heart skipped. It was her again, the same baby from the photo she had found before. This time, though, there was something different. Eleanor was smiling, but her eyes looked far away, filled with quiet sadness. Her grandmother stood close to her, almost protectively. Behind them, a garden stretched out, wild and beautiful, full of life. On the back of the photo, someone had written in soft pencil, "The day everything changed." Lena turned the photo over and stared at it for a long time. She wished she could ask them what that day meant. What had changed? What had they said to each other? She felt as if the house still held answers somewhere, hidden like treasures waiting to be found. Later that evening, she made tea and sat near the window. The sky outside was fading into soft orange and pink. Her grandmother's rocking chair creaked gently as she leaned back, holding the photo. She thought about how love could take so many forms, some gentle, some painful, all of them real. Her phone buzzed on the table. It was her mother again. "I've been thinking about you," her mother said softly when Lena answered, "and about everything that happened. I want to show you something. Can you come tomorrow?" There was hesitation in her voice, but also warmth. Lena agreed. She didn't know what to expect, but she knew she had to go. The next day, she drove to her mother's home. It was a quiet neighborhood filled with tall trees and the smell of fresh flowers. Her mother opened the door before Lena even knocked. She looked tired, but her smile was real. "I went through some of your grandmother's old things," her mother said as she led Lena inside. "I found this." She handed her a small, worn-out notebook. The cover was cracked and faded, but when Lena opened it, her grandmother's handwriting filled the pages. "It's a journal," her mother explained. "She started writing in it after Eleanor left." Lena's hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. The first few entries were about daily life, gardening, baking, visiting the market. But then the tone changed. Her grandmother wrote about how quiet the house felt without Eleanor, how the baby's laughter was the only thing that kept her from breaking. One line caught Lena's eye. "She trusted me with her heart. I will spend my life keeping it safe." Lena felt her throat tighten. The journal showed her grandmother in a new light, not as someone who hid the truth out of fear, but as someone who carried a responsibility so heavy it shaped her entire life. She turned to the last few pages. The writing had grown shakier, the ink lighter. The final entry read, "If she ever learns the truth, I hope she forgives me. I only ever wanted her to feel loved." Tears blurred her vision. She closed the journal gently and held it to her chest. Her mother sat quietly beside her, not saying anything, just letting the silence speak. "I used to think she was hard to understand," her mother whispered, "but now I see she was just doing what she thought was right." Lena nodded. She did. They both did. That night, Lena couldn't stop thinking about the lives of the two women who had shaped her, without ever meaning to cross paths that way. Her grandmother's strength, Eleanor's sacrifice, and now, her own journey to piece their stories together. She knew there was one more thing she had to do. She had to visit Eleanor's grave. It took her a few days to find the address. The town where Eleanor had lived was a few hours away, near the sea. When Lena arrived, the sky was overcast and the air smelled faintly of salt and rain. The cemetery sat on a small hill overlooking the water. It was peaceful and quiet, with wildflowers growing between the stones. She walked slowly, following the map she had been given. When she finally found the name, Eleanor Matthews, her breath caught. The headstone was simple, with only her name and 2 short lines beneath. Loved deeply. Gone too soon. Lena knelt down, tracing the carved letters with her fingertips. The stone was cool under her touch. "Hi," she whispered softly. "I'm your daughter." Her voice trembled and tears filled her eyes. She stayed there for a long time, not saying much, just letting the moment breathe. The wind picked up slightly, moving strands of her hair across her face. She closed her eyes and listened to the waves in the distance, to the rustle of leaves, to her own heartbeat that suddenly felt connected to everything around her. She took the last letter Eleanor had written, the one addressed to her, and placed it gently at the base of the headstone. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for loving me even from far away. I know now that you didn't leave me. You gave me a life." A tear rolled down her cheek, but it wasn't from sadness. It was from peace. When she looked up, she noticed something glimmering near the grass. It was a small pendant, half buried in the dirt, shaped like a heart. She picked it up and brushed it clean. On the back, faintly etched, were the letters LM, her initials. She smiled through her tears. It felt like a message, a quiet sign that she wasn't alone. As she stood to leave, the sun broke through the clouds, lighting up the water below. For a moment, everything felt still and bright. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the salty air. It felt like starting over. On the drive back, she thought about the box again, the one that had started it all. When she first opened it, she had expected memories. Instead, she had found herself. That night, back in the old house, she lit a candle and sat by the window. The flame flickered softly, casting warm light across the room. She took the wooden box from the table and opened it one last time. Inside were the letters, the photographs, and now the pendant she had found. She smiled and whispered, "You can rest now. I understand." The candle burned gently, filling the room with a soft glow. Outside, the moon rose high, its reflection stretching across the quiet garden. The same garden where, years ago, 2 women had made a promise that would change a child's life forever. Lena leaned back and closed her eyes. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel the weight of confusion or loss. She felt whole. She finally understood that family wasn't only about blood. It was about love in all its complicated and beautiful forms. Some truths hurt when they first arrive. But this truth had set her free. Days turned into weeks after Lena visited Eleanor's grave, but the peace she found that day stayed with her. The quiet moments that used to feel heavy now felt calm. The confusion that had once clouded her mind began to fade away like morning mist. She started seeing her life in a new way, not as a mystery but as a story that had finally come full circle. Every morning, she walked through the garden outside the old house. The flowers were beginning to bloom again after years of neglect. She would water them, trim the wild stems, and sometimes talk softly to them as if they were old friends. The garden had once belonged to her grandmother, but now it felt like hers too. She could almost imagine both Eleanor and her grandmother standing beside her, smiling quietly, proud of what she was building. Sometimes, while she worked, she would hear a memory in her head, her grandmother's voice humming a soft tune from her childhood. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was comfort. It reminded her that love never really leaves. It just changes its form. One afternoon, while sorting through some of her grandmother's old papers, Lena found something she hadn't seen before. It was a small envelope tucked inside the back of a recipe book. On it, written in her grandmother's neat handwriting, were the words, "For when she is ready, her heart began to race." She carefully opened the envelope and found a folded letter. It wasn't long, but every word carried warmth. "My dearest girl, if you are reading this, then you have learned the truth. I never wanted to hide it from you out of shame or fear. but because I wanted you to grow up free from the pain that had once broken our hearts. You were never unwanted. You were loved twice, by the woman who gave you life and by the woman who raised you. You were always meant to be both of ours." Lena's eyes filled with tears. She read the letter again and again, letting every word settle inside her. She felt a gentle ache, but also something new, a sense of belonging that went deeper than she had ever felt before. That evening, as the sun dipped low behind the trees, she sat on the porch with the letter in her hand. She thought about her grandmother and Eleanor, two women connected by love, loss, and hope. They had both chosen her in their own way, and she carried parts of them within her. Her phone buzzed again. It was her mother. "How are you?" she asked gently. "I found another letter," Lena said softly. "From Grandma. She left it for me. It feels like she's still here somehow." Her mother was silent for a moment before replying. "She would be happy you found it. She always said you had her heart." Lena smiled through her tears. "Maybe I do." They talked for a long time that night. For the first time, there was no tension in their voices, no unspoken pain between them, just honesty. Her mother told her stories about her grandmother, how she used to make up lullabies, how she collected wildflowers and pressed them in her books, how she loved watching storms roll in from the porch. She always said storms reminded her that peace comes after chaos, her mother said. Lena looked outside the window at the darkening sky and whispered, "She was right." Over the next few days, Lena began to write. Not for anyone else, but for herself. She wanted to remember everything she had learned, the truth, the love, the journey. Each night she would sit at her desk with a cup of tea and her notebook, and her words would flow like she was having a conversation with her grandmother and Eleanor. She wrote about the first time she found the box, how she had been scared of what she might find, and how now she was grateful she had opened it. She wrote about the fear of not knowing who she was and the peace that came from finally finding out. She wrote about forgiveness, about how it didn't mean forgetting, but understanding. As the pages filled, she began to feel lighter. One morning, she decided to visit the library in town. She wanted to find old records, maybe more about Eleanor's life, her work, her dreams, the things she had loved. The librarian, an elderly man with kind eyes, helped her search. After a while, he pulled out an old newspaper article. The headline read, "Local artists' paintings to be displayed in Community Hall." And there she was, Eleanor, standing beside her artwork. The photograph showed her smiling shyly beside a painting of a small child holding a red balloon. Lena stared at it, her heart swelling with emotion. It was like seeing a piece of her mother's soul come alive through art. She made a copy of the article and took it home. That evening, she framed it and placed it beside the letters and photographs. It felt like she was putting her family back together piece by piece. Weeks passed and the house began to feel warmer. It wasn't just a building full of memories anymore. It was a home again. She painted the walls, repaired the porch, and filled the rooms with laughter and music. Friends visited and she told them bits and pieces of her story, though she never shared every detail. Some things, she felt, were meant to stay close to her heart. One evening, she held a small gathering at the house. Her mother came, along with a few neighbors. They shared food, stories, and laughter. Her mother looked around and said softly, "Your grandmother would be proud of what you've done here." Lena nodded. "I think she's here right now listening." They both smiled, and for the first time in a long time there was no heaviness between them, only peace. As the night went on, someone suggested they step outside to see the stars. The sky was clear and full of light. Lena looked up and thought of Eleanor and her grandmother again. Somewhere, she felt, they were watching too. Later, when everyone had gone and the house was quiet again, Lena sat down at her desk. She opened her notebook and wrote her final entry. "I used to think I was lost, that my story was broken, but I see now that it wasn't broken at all, it was unfolding. Every secret, every silence, every hidden truth led me here. I am the sum of their love, their choices, and their courage. I am both of them, and yet I am fully myself." She closed the notebook gently, her heart full. The next morning, she placed the wooden box back where she had first found it, now neatly filled with letters, photographs, and memories. She tied a small ribbon around it and whispered, "Thank you for everything." As she stood by the window, sunlight spilled across the floor. The garden outside was alive again, full of color and life. A soft breeze blew through, carrying the scent of fresh flowers. Lena smiled. She no longer felt like she was living in the shadow of the past. She was part of it, yes, but she was also writing her own story now, a story of truth, forgiveness, and love that would carry forward. That night, before going to bed, she lit one candle by the window. The flame danced gently, its light reflected in her eyes. It was her way of saying goodnight, to her grandmother, to Eleanor, and to the girl she used to be before she knew the truth. As she blew out the candle, she whispered softly, "I finally know who I am." The room fell quiet. The stars outside shimmered like tiny promises in the dark sky. Somewhere in that silence it felt like two hearts were smiling down at her. At peace, finally home. And as Lena drifted to sleep, she felt a warmth wrap around her like a gentle embrace, the kind only love could leave behind. She knew then that she was no longer just the girl who opened an old box. She was the woman who discovered her soul inside it.